The team that undoubtedly had the worst start to the season in Bahrain was McLaren. Oscar Piastri's F1 debut lasted just 14 laps before he had to retire with an electrical issue, and Lando Norris didn't exactly enjoy his race much more after suffering a pneumatic system issue which caused him to pit 6 different times before McLaren called it a day. It's obvious to say that it was a bad race for McLaren. I mean, a double DNF due to reliability is usually a Ferrari-type howler, but more than anything else, it once again brings up the same questions that we've been asking ourselves over the past couple of years. When will McLaren make that jump up that they keep saying they're going to make? When will they give Lando the race-winning car that he deserves? And also, how long will Lando keep wanting to stay at McLaren if they keep under-delivering season after season? I don't want to make this video sound like it's me saying that McLaren's entire 2023 season is over off the back of just one race. I mean, just look at last year. After a bad Bahrain where they suffered with brake issues and failed to score points with both drivers, just 4 races later they became the first and only team in 2022 outside of the top 3 teams to finish on the podium with Lando Norris. Things can change very quickly in Formula 1, and as unlikely as it looks now, McLaren still have plenty of races to fight for points, podiums, and maybe even wins if the stars align. Having said that, McLaren, even from their launch, were already talking like they were on the back foot. Their bad preseason test, doing less miles than any other team, and being slow whilst they were doing those miles anyway, meant that Bahrain in the end wasn't even that surprising. I think disappointment is the word that comes to mind more than anything else. On the outside, there is actually so much that is going right at McLaren, and yet somehow in 2023, they've actually fallen even further behind their rivals compared to where they left off at the end of 2022. Aston Martin looked to be potentially the second best team on the grid, and even Alpine, despite having a very messy first race, they still showed some positive signs with Ocon getting into Q3, and even Gasly fighting back in the race to go from P20 to finishing in the points in P9. Now, in fairness, the McLaren probably wasn't as bad as the double DNF suggests, which I think will give the team more hope for the coming races. Lando just missed out on Q3 qualifying in 11th, and during his 14 laps, Piastri was actually racing with the likes of Albon, Sargent, and Ocon. New team principal Andrea Stella was a lot more positive after the race, saying, "I think the most positive element is without issues, Lando would have been a strong contender for points. The pace of the car in the race was almost beyond expectation. I think in the race we saw some reward of the work we did over the winter in trying to improve the interaction between the car and the tyres. This was certainly a strong position on Lando's side, but also Oscar actually having good degradation in the first stint. He overtook cars, it was a very tight race, so we could have been in the points with 2 cars. That's the most positive outcome of this event." Watching the race back, it wasn't as bad as it seemed on the surface because, genuinely without issues, a double point score wasn't completely out of the question. And if the tyre degradation is as good as Stella suggests, that means that we never really got to see the McLaren at its strongest, which, similar to the Aston Martin, would have come towards the end of each stint as everyone else's tyres would have started to wear off. It also means that when you look at some of the top teams like Mercedes and Ferrari, who really struggled with their tyre wear, this could be one of the strengths of the MCL60, which hopefully we'll see more of in the coming races on more tyre-sensitive tracks. Despite all of these positives, the fact that Stella felt the need to say that the pace of the car was actually beyond what they expected in Bahrain, that to me is not really a good thing. If anything, it just makes me even more frustrated at the fact that the team knew that they were in trouble going in and weren't able to sort it out during the winter. We know that at McLaren there is major infrastructure changes being made right now with their brand new wind tunnel under construction and also new driver in simulator loop as well. These changes should be finished by the end of the year, meaning that the 2024 car will be the first car to benefit from all of these upgrades. However, going off the back of last year and now this year as well, I think that there is much more fundamental problems at McLaren that a shiny new wind tunnel is not going to solve. Ultimately, a wind tunnel and simulator are all just correlation tools. They're there for you to get information back that the parts that you're designing are actually doing what you expected them to do. But McLaren have now built two cars that are not only off the pace, but as Lando Norris has alluded to over the past 2 years, also seem to have tricky driving characteristics that make them harder to drive whilst having no performance benefit. What makes this really frustrating is that whilst the technical department is clearly underperforming, there are so many other parts of the team that are actually operating at a very high level. Commercially, I would argue that McLaren are probably the best team on the grid. I mean, the amount of sponsors that they have is even becoming a running joke online at this point, with 44 official partners listed on their site. They've also been the first team to add innovative technology to their car that allows them to digitally display different sponsors at different times, which will probably become ubiquitous in F1 in years to come. Although that has also come at the cost, with people online basically saying that Norris and Piastri are driving around in an orange tractor with an Amazon Kindle on the side. Even the fact that Zak Brown was able to pinch Piastri from Alpine, which was a very shrewd move, shows that this team on a commercial and managerial level are one of the best on the grid. And the mere fact that they have Oscar Piastri and a driver as good as Lando Norris, who Zak Brown has already called a franchise driver akin to the likes of Verstappen and Leclerc, as their driver lineup, there is just so much right about McLaren. Unfortunately, this just isn't translating to their technical department, which in reality is where the real performance actually comes from. Technical director James Key has been working at McLaren since mid-2019. His cars, in the hands of Sainz, Norris and Ricciardo, have scored podiums and even a win on merit. However, with all of the traits that these cars seem to have, and now with back-to-back disappointing starts to the season, pressure will be mounting on James Key. I'm sure that James Key and McLaren will improve the MCL60 because McLaren showed last year that they can develop a car well throughout a season. But I'm still not 100% convinced that they actually understand why their cars seem to have these tricky traits, and also just the general lack of downforce. It doesn't matter how good your tools, facility or wind tunnel are, if you don't understand why your concept isn't working, then there's probably a much more deep-rooted fundamental problem that's holding you back. Naturally, McLaren starting on the back foot will once again start to fuel the rumour mill about Lando Norris's future, and rightly so. A driver as good as Lando can't just keep competing to score a P7 or a P6 on a good day. I genuinely think that we've seen a slight shift in tone from Lando to begin the year. Maybe you can say it's just him maturing, but to me he doesn't seem to be the always smiley, always jokey, bubbling personality from a few seasons ago. Will Buxton said that Lando allegedly punched a wall during testing, which I'm neither going to state as fact or deny entirely, but even during the Bahrain weekend, in interviews he looks to be much more downbeat than ever. Now look, I am not saying and I am not expecting him to be buzzing at having a bad car yet again, but I genuinely think that despite the fact that he is still young and still has plenty of time on his side, I also think that he's quickly starting to lose patience with McLaren. Yes, he's got a contract that runs to the end of 2025, but if the team don't show any signs of progress, I don't think he's even going to be there for that long. The rumours that will not go away will be him being linked to Red Bull. Now, this is all dependent not on Lando, but on Sergio Perez. And off the back of that first race, Checo did a great job and doesn't deserve to have his seat called into question. He qualified just a 10th away from Max, and then in the race fought back to finish in second to give the team a 1-2. But it's very obvious that Christian Horner has an eye for Lando, and even though I don't think that Checo deserves to be replaced anytime soon, with Lando almost there in the periphery, it puts Checo under even more pressure because there's almost a replacement driver already waiting in the wings that Horner will absolutely go for if Checo doesn't perform. Although there is so much right at McLaren, the most important thing, the car, looks wrong yet again. There is no doubt that they will improve over the season and will have plenty of good races, but if they continue to show no signs of progress, How long do you think Lando will wait before he thinks enough is enough? If McLaren end 2023 looking as bad as they do right now, will he still be there in 2024?